Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. Let's hope we still have a few faithful left after our recent trials and tribulations with the technology here. We're trying to clean up this mess, and we're doing an extra podcast tonight to get something clean back in the top of our menu again.
As many of you know, we've been trying out live podcasting and it seems like we just can't get enough internet to run the program on either of our computers, and it was leading to horrible problems, which we greatly embarrassed and frustrated us. And so we're going to give up on it for now. Go back to Skype, and hopefully this will be much cleaner for everyone listening. And hopefully Bruce will turn off his phone. There he goes.
Hopefully you will.
I got my phone in my pocket too. It's going to ring any second, so then you can scold me. So fortunately, there's plenty of to talk about. We our podcast was at the absolutely worst quality when you wanted it to be the best, in the playoffs, but not to be. But here we go. And the first thing we're going to talk about, Bruce, there's a number of, this may surprise you, Bruce, but the same people who could, when Connor McDavid was drafted to Edmonton and who had the astonishing ability of reading his facial expressions and being able to divine from his facial expressions his innermost thoughts. These are quite extraordinary people, Toronto sports writers. And they are now making other claims about Connor McDavid. They don't read his mind anymore, but they are kind of ordering him around. They're telling him what to do because they have such wisdom that they can tell they know what's best for Connor McDavid because they are sports writers in Toronto. So this is from Cathal Kelly of the Globe and Mail.
Oh, the guy who hated Edmonton, talked about what an ugly city Edmonton was based on his drive from the airport to downtown hotel.
Yeah.
In a taxi. That guy.
Yeah. Cathal, my boy, or Cathal, or Kathy for short, or whatever his name is. If McDavid wants out of Edmonton, it's on him to make that happen. He should do that. He'd be doing everyone involved a favor. But nothing has to happen. As long as they have the best player in the known galaxy, the Oilers can continue being operatic failures. People will still pay to see him play. Maybe becoming the new Marcel Dionne and making 8 figures is enough for McDavid. Let's hope so, because that's where he's headed.
This guy's from Toronto?
Exactly.
That has won 0 playoff series in the entire Cap era? Please.
Well, they're full of themselves. They're riding high now, Bruce.
They're full of something.
They're riding high now because they've won 3 playoff games and they're.
Well, maybe they'll even win a series this year. Well, that's fantastic. The Oilers have only won 4 playoff series in the Cap area, and that's 4 more than Toronto has won. So he wants to talk about this being a place of failure. Connor McDavid's won the playoff series. How many of their guys have?
And almost, they almost
for other
won.
Teams.
Yeah. Anyway, just kind of whatever.
Stick it where the sun don't shine, Cathal.
Toronto has lots of great people, Bruce, and Maple Leaf. There's lots of Maple Leaf fans. There's also evidently there's some dimwits in Toronto as well, and
there can even be a horse's ass or two mixed in there, David.
The new Marcel Dionne. So the suggestion seems to be in Edmonton, it's all about making the money and nobody cares about winning. And I don't know what he's getting at here. But anyway, as for his prediction about McDavid, we'll see how that plays out. Sometimes it takes a while for a really crappy team like the Oilers were to rebuild. It took a long time for the Pittsburgh Penguins in an era where it was actually easier, I'm going to suggest, to build. In some ways, because you could retain all your good players. Now, the Oilers haven't really faced that yet. But it took Lemieux's Penguins a long time to get good. It was in his 7th year that they finally won a cup.
His 6th year, which is equivalent to McDavid, where McDavid is now, the Penguins missed the playoffs.
in a 21 team league where
Yeah.
16 of the 21
Well,
teams made the playoffs, did they
in
not?
the 6-team Norris division, where the top four made it. To be fair, that he was in the biggest division, the only division that had 6 teams, and it was a very stacked division. The Norris division always had good teams with the Flyers and the Rangers and the Caps of that era, and the Islanders, of course. So it was pretty tough to get in there, but I guess by 1990 the Islanders were out of it, but that was always a strong division. So the toughest, but you'd think with the great Mario Lemieux on their team, plus some of the other stars they had by 1990, like Paul Coffey, they'd be walking into the playoffs. And guess what? They weren't there yet. Just took them an extra year or two longer than anybody thought. And Lemieux sure took a lot of heat during that time as well.
What amazes me, Bruce, is this a sports writer who knows nothing what it's like to be Connor McDavid or anything about Connor McDavid, probably saying he should do that. He should be asking, he should make it happen, he should force it out. That takes a lot of chutzpah.
Gall?
That's a nice gall. Chutzpah is a nice way of putting it.
My mom would say gall.
Yeah, it takes a lot of gall. Like, what the hell do you know, Cathal Kelly? You don't know anything about him. Oh. You're just speaking out of your butt. And here's the fact. It is a free world, and people are free to go wherever they want. They have commitments though to their friends, their family, and their contractual obligations to their employer. Mm-hmm. But they are free to go where they want. And I'm okay. In this modern NHL, with the way the rules are set out, if at the end of his contract, Connor McDavid said, "Hey, I want to sign elsewhere," I'm not going to be that guy who's going to say, "Oh, he's betraying the city. He shouldn't do that." He's based on the rules of his business. At that point, he'll be free to go where he wants to go, and that may happen. It also may happen in Toronto with Austin Matthews. So, and if Austin Matthews wants to exercise that right to go to Arizona in a few years, more power to him. This is the way it's set up. What we do know about McDavid, what we see and what he says is he's this incredible conscientious person, puts a lot of pressure on himself. You can see the defeats are in fact eating him up. That's clear from everything about the guy and from things that he actually says. Mm-hmm. But there is a tremendous amount of, and he addressed this today, how he thinks they're trending in the right direction. He's also very tight with Draisaitl and Nurse. These three players, they're building something together. Mm-hmm. It's significant. What we're looking for in life, all of us, I think, is some significance. And these guys have something going on together. It's pretty clear. They want to build something in Edmonton. They want to raise this team up, if just for their own, just doing it together. This, their band of merry men. And I think he's dedicated to that. Everything he's ever said indicates that, not that he's secretly itching to get out of Edmonton, like Toronto sports writers seem to suggest. And this includes the wonderful Sid Cicero, yeah. I don't watch a lot of TSN. I guess he's now on breakfast television. I do not. And he
was on this Tim and Sid show for years.
Yeah, I don't.
The Score. He's from the Score background. And
okay,
Sportsnet 360 now.
So I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Sid. His quote.
I don't think I got it right either.
Cicero. Okay. Connor McDavid's his quote is, "Connor McDavid's not going to put up with this much longer." So I guess Sid is he can read his mind, like he's engaged in mind, like he knows what Connor McDavid wants and thinks, and he's telling us now. So there you have it.
Well, here's a sportscaster for you who's actually engaged and knows Connor McDavid, and that is the estimable Ryan Rashog, the sports bureau chief of TSN locally here in Edmonton. And he says, an excellent and engaged Connor McDavid in his year-end Zoom call. Very honest about his feelings on the team, his leadership, room for growth in his game, and the disappointment. Made it clear he's not looking to go anywhere and wants to see it through here with this group. What are the chances Cathal Kelly and Sid Cicero are watching this Zoom call? Or maybe they
Exactly.
did and they educated themselves after they said the stupid stuff they said.
Exactly. Bruce, we're going to move on quickly from that and talk about,
Let's. Oh.
let's talk about, we're going to go through, we're going to do a series of podcasts in the next couple of days, um, where we go through the Oilers' performance in the playoffs. And we kind of, before this is all forgotten, and we're just, what I want you to do, what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to try to do myself, is not to think of these players outside of their playoff
Right.
performance, but just think about their playoff performance and just
Yeah.
rate them on what we saw in those 4 games, which is difficult to do because we have all these impressions of these players.
Oh, sure.
Today we'll start with the forwards, Bruce, and before we get to the good stuff, which is the centers, because there were some pretty strong performances from various centers. I'm going to suggest we will start with the wingers, and we, as people know who listen to this podcast, we go over the grade A scoring chances. We think that's an important thing in the game. I think it's the heart of the game. The thing that separates the good teams from the bad teams is generating scoring chances and defending them. And it was pretty even in this series overall between the two teams. But there was one area where it struck me that the Oilers just really were lacking. And I think the numbers back this up, is on the wings.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, this team, it does still, after all these years, have a problem on the wings, getting production from these wingers. Now, that could change in the future, but if we're just going on these 4 games, there wasn't one winger. There wasn't one who really stepped up, I'm going to suggest, who really took hold in this playoffs and made a statement that they're a top winger in the NHL. And that includes Jesse Puljujärvi, who showed flashes and who was good. But that's my overall comment. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm going to gainsay you on a technicality. The minute that he moved from center to left wing, Leon Draisaitl uh, wa- upgraded the Oilers' group of wingers by a fantastic margin. But of course, we're going to consider him under the centers. But Leon mostly played wing in this series. If you want to focus just on the series, Leon played basically 3 1/4 games with McDavid.
Bruce, I'm going to gainsay your gainsay
Okay, go for it.
and suggest that when McDavid and Draisaitl are together,
Yeah.
the center is in the defensive zone is often the winger that they're playing with, the other winger.
Okay.
That who is the center? I mean, who takes most of the faceoffs when they're together? Who plays the center? Who plays who's the first forward back usually, or who's usually covering the defensive slot when they're together? I don't think I think that they share it, and it's often kind of a confused partnership in sharing it. So I don't.
Well, okay.
When he
Well,
moves there, I'm going to say he's still a center because he
okay,
is
then
kind of.
McDavid upgraded the wingers by a lot.
You gainsayed my gainsay that I gainsayed you on. All right, I'll give you that. You gainsayer.
The horizontal deployment of McDavid Draisaitl solves the wing problem to an extent, and it creates a bigger problem at center. But I think we should just consider them both as centers. They're certainly in class of themselves. So, and
That's where I have them.
the rest of them, you're right. I mean, we had 1 goal from Zach Kassian, 1 goal from Jesse Puljujärvi, 1 from RNH, 1 on the power play from Alex Chiasson. And RNH, I think he was playing center
Scored
at
as
the
a
time.
center, correct.
Yeah. So anyway, and Draisaitl, he got 2 and McDavid 1 when they were playing together. So at least one of those was scored by a winger, and all the rest after that: Yamamoto 0, Shore, Neal, Archibald, Ennis, Cahoon, all wingers, all of them with 0 goals, most of them with 0 points.
How about this? When we go through the wingers here, we'll try to answer a question. Did they improve based on their playoff performance? Did they improve their chances of getting a contract or earning a spot on the team next year, or earning a spot higher up in the lineup for some players? Some of them are under contract, right? So, but that'll be the question to answer. Let's start with, let's just start with Jesse Puljujärvi. How would you rate his play, Bruce?
Overall, pretty good. I liked his game. I thought he was. I think he's really starting to feel his oats. Like he's looking confident. Like, I belong in this league. I can play with these guys. In fact, I can outplay these guys. And he's skating well. He's skating well with the puck. he's really engaging on the physical side in the battles and in the battles for possession and for position in front of the net. He's defensively, he's still learning, I'll say, but he makes good plays. And when he's in the right spot, he's a good defender, and it's a matter of reading the play, and that's still, like I say, a work in progress. But he made huge strides this year, and he did nothing to take a detour from that in the postseason at all. I liked him on right wing, and for me, for much of the series, he was Edmonton's third best forward.
I will agree with that. Although the gap is huge, of course, between the top two and the next one. So, yeah, he was part of the. On the plus side, he scored a great rebound goal. I think that was game 1, and I thought also in the overtime, as the overtime went along, I was thinking, hey, there's a few players who looked like they might score. Jesse Puljujarvi is definitely on that list. The way he was charging in there and handling the puck, making plays behind the net, using his size, he's getting it together. He's coming on. So, so he's somewhere in the spectrum between, the bottom end is kind of like a bigger version of Willie Lindstrom, and then at the top end, Blake Wheeler, I guess.
That's a nice player at both ends. Yeah.
Both ends. So I think he's gonna be a good player. Willie Lindstrom was a good second line winger in the NHL for a few years with Messier and Anderson, decent hockey player, and Blake Wheeler's a top line winger. So he's coming, like he's taken a step, and he was part of the general defensive composure meltdown in Game 3 where he. It's like Cuckoo in Game 4. Both of them had a moment where they overreacted to the guy with the puck and spun out of control. So instead of just staying in front of them, they both went for a more dramatic play, and they didn't stop and start on the puck. And Puljujarvi was really responsible in a big way for Morrissey's goal in Game 3, which was a pretty ugly moment. So he's got some growing to do on defense. He's got some growing to do on the attack, but yeah, it was really, I'm going to say, I agree with you. He really took a step up in terms of my impression of him, because you want to see him do that in the playoff situation. And he did it. He was every bit as good in the playoffs as he was in some games in the regular season, but it's still kind of, there's some inconsistency, which I think is a confidence issue. This is a little tough one because they were talking on Hockey Night in Canada about McDavid kind of reaming him out and not wanting to, because he missed a pass to McDavid on the fly and then saying, I don't want to play on the line with this guy. They were pretty sure on Hockey Night in Canada that they knew what they were talking about. I'm a little less sure. I don't know how they knew that. It could be the case. They could have nailed that, but maybe they were engaged in a little guessing game there as well.
Well, somebody whose opinion I respect said they saw a different angle of McDavid shouting down the bench, and actually Puljujarvi was leaning forward, and it looked like McDavid was talking behind him towards someone else, whether it be a coach. Coach.
That's what it looked like to me.
Okay, well.
But he might have been saying, Coach, take him off my line. Like, who knows? I don't know.
He might have also said, bring me the Gatorade.
Exactly.
I mean, he was visibly, I actually didn't like this from McDavid right at the time when the pass came in his feet. He kind of did the sort of gesticulation stuff, like this isn't good enough. And that's a soccer move where you show up your teammate a little bit or it's a goalie that nobody likes on their team move where they stare down and single out the guy who's made the mistake.
Bruce, are you bringing up...
That's happened in sports.
I know it does. Are you bringing up the dreaded bad body language? Dun, dun, dun.
I know,
it's true, though. It's people. There's something to be said for it. It's not total crap. I mean, people make fun of that. Well, if that's a criticism of a player, but there's some truth to it. You can't have this. Players do sulk, and there's a certain amount of success in hockey, at least, or in life. Some people might even say of sucking it up and being stoic and keeping a steady demeanor when things are going rough. So,
and letting that stuff roll off you if other guys are more demonstrative than you happen to be. Yeah,
that's true too.
They can bark and then it's over. Just let it out and communicate. We need to do that better next time, and and hopefully nobody's feelings get hurt, and they're all being well paid to be as good as they can be in their profession. So I'm not too worried about it, but I noticed it.
All right, moving on to Ryan Nugent Hopkins, who scored his beautiful goal as a centerman, and played 3 games on the wing where he was as unspectacular in the playoffs on the wing as he had been in the regular season, which was really not spectacular at all. So I think his value went up based on his last game as center. That's going to leave a good impression in everybody's head. Maybe he can be the second line center on this team. But I don't think really that the playoffs helped his cause very much at all. In fact, I think they probably hurt his cause because of that ineffectual play on the wing. He just wasn't getting it done. He wasn't making scoring plays at even strength. Now, I was just Jonathan Willis ran some stats, and over his career, he's not a great even strength scorer. He's at 1.8 points per 60, which is kind of a borderline second line player, I'll suggest, in the NHL. And borderline second line players in the NHL, but don't get 6 years at $7 million. At the same time, he's been a very good power player, quite a strong power player throughout his career.
Yep.
So, what's your take?
Well, unlike Puljujarvi, who's under contract for another year, this is a guy whose contract has expired.
Yeah.
And we're very much at an inflection point of what happens next with Nugent Hopkins. I didn't mind his play in game 1. I thought he was okay on the not necessarily creation of great scoring chances, but just in overall play. Like, he was sharp on the puck. He was winning battles. He wasn't, he was advancing the puck in the right direction at least. And in game 3, he was the one Oiler I thought who raised his game after the comeback when it was 4-4. I thought Nuge was about the best of the Oilers between 4-4 and the eventual game winner. He had like 4 shots on net, and they were pretty good shots in that time. He was the one guy that sort of upped the ante and sort of said, we need a goal. I'm going to try and get it. And of course he didn't get it, but he tried. And then, as you mentioned, game 4, he did get that beauty goal where he fired the high shot from outside and caused one that the netminder Connor Hellebuck couldn't handle, and he jumped on the rebound, controlled it with his skate, kicked it up to his stick, and just made a real nice step around the goalie and roof job off the backhand. That was a real high-end goal. That tied the score too. A very, very big goal at the time too, of course. But so we saw, I think in that game, I thought throughout the overtime, he was excellent. Like, he was committed, he played hard, but there just wasn't much in the way of scoring chances, where there was just a lot of,
Close.
Don't give up anything, but don't really, I guess, the line got a couple chances, but anyway, it was a low event kind of overtime.
Yeah.
There was
I had one thought about him, Bruce. He did seem to get stronger in the overtime, and I was thinking, maybe it's because he's more like built like a marathon runner. Like, I thought some of the smaller guys seemed to weather it a little bit better, and I was thinking he might be in the best shape of any of the players out there because he seemed to wilt the least in terms of his speed. He was going fast throughout, and he didn't seem to slow down or get winded, even as he was playing long shifts. But again, I guess the phrase is perimeter player. He really strikes me at this point of his, throughout his career. Like, when he's with really good other players, he can cycle the puck and he gets into the guts of the game and he works with them and he's a give and go player. But the reason he's not a driver is he doesn't drive through players or work his way through players. And he's not McDavid. He's not going to be deking them constantly either. When he gets open ice, he's really dangerous, which is why he's so good on 3-on-3 in the power play. Kailer Yamamoto, Bruce, what's your take? Did he add to his value or detract from it?
In the playoffs specifically?
Yeah, that's the question.
I think marginally he added. I thought he played pretty good, but he didn't produce anything. And his whatever he had of his offensive game, which was his calling card coming out of junior. You'll recall in his draft year, he had the most points of any junior player that year in the
Yes.
draft. 99 points he had. He was for the draft first year draft eligibles. He was top of that list. And he came in, and last year he had 26 points in 27 games. And the feeling was, we got a real live one here. Someone's going to put the puck in the net. Well, that just went away in the second half of the year. And he literally he had one goal, one power play goal that he kind of chipped into the net when he was filling in on the power play for someone who was out. And at even strength, he had 0 goals in his final 25 games, and of course 0 more in the playoffs. And when he did get a chance, a really great chance in overtime of game 3, was it, where he was alone in front and he kind of had a muffin into Hellebuck, and it's just I've said this more than once this season. He's got to work on his shot, but I wonder if there's not something underlying there, that maybe he had a wrist or something that wasn't quite 100%, because he had some time in and out of the lineup, and there was his battle level was high, very good, especially in those playoff games. But his ability to make real hard plays with the puck and to be really creative with the puck I haven't seen so much of it. There was a goal in the Toronto game tonight where I think it was Galchenyuk for Toronto. He had the puck right on the edge of the crease, and he made a behind the back pass to Nylander for the tap in. And I said to my wife, that's the exact goal that Yamamoto set up for Draisaitl last year, where everybody in the world thought he's going to make a play on net, and instead he somehow saw the teammate in the open and he made the behind the back pass for the tap in. And there was none of that kind of creative edge in his game, I don't think. Like, he was really more just a meat and potatoes, just chase and pursue and battle for the puck guy. And he won his share of battles, and he's got the really good defensive stick. He gets in the lanes. There's lots to like about his game, but the offensive part of it really kind of fell off a cliff especially the second half of the year.
Yeah, I think he raised his value slightly because his battle level, his compete level was very strong in the playoffs. But again, the results were not there. And what does it speak to? We've seen him play with a high level of skill. He, on the dynamite line, Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl combined so well. Maybe he just didn't ever have that chemistry with any group of players. Though they had the dynamite line together, and we didn't really see them take off this year. So I think Bruce, he's got to. My sense is he's got to get stronger. He's got to get more physically powerful, and work on the shot, but just work on his strength to be able to give himself the leverage that he needs to make those plays that he's not quite able to make right now because he's a little too easy to take off the puck. And he can keep working on it. Like Tippett talked about the need for all these players to improve. Well, Yamamoto's in that group. He's got to get a better shot. He's got to get a little stronger. He's got to get a little faster on his skates, a little bit more agile. All of these things have got to happen for him to take the next level as a player. It's going to make it a little easier to sign him than if he had replicated his season last year where he was a point-a-game player. So now he's not looking at $3 or $4 or $5 million a year. If he had replicated that kind of great run he had last year. So I wish he had done that, but that's not the case. So he's not going to get as much money on his contract. All right, Dominic.
What do you think they'll sign him to? 2 years?
Yeah, I think they should try to
Ethan Bear contract.
Yeah, that's about right, Bruce. 2 years at $2 million. Is that what Bear got? 2.5?
Yeah,
was it?
2.
Something like
2
that.
times 2.
Yeah. Dominic Cahoon, who came in with a really good points per game from last year when he was with Buffalo. It's Pittsburgh. I remember that he at even strength, he had outscored Taylor Hall on a rate basis in 2019-20. He was at I think 2.3 points per 60, which is a really good second line winger, kind of a bottom first line winger in terms of scoring. And we were all hoping that Dominic Cahoon would be able to replicate those results in Edmonton. And what we saw was a player who's very good with the puck, who can really pass it. not a great shooter, and I was a solid positional defender who gave his best effort on defense, but not a fast. He's not. I don't think he's fast enough, Bruce.
Mhm.
And that's what came through to me was he can't really keep up to be truly effective on the attack. And maybe I don't know if he's going to stick in the NHL. Would be even though he had that good point scoring over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is, the difference between the NHL and the AHL score is often speed. And I just see Cahoon as that guy who's going to go to the KHL and put up a point a game. He's going to go to the Swiss League and lead the league in scoring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in the I don't think he's going to be in the NHL much longer.
That's realistic. It's funny. Today I saw on Twitter feed in German from Der Spiegel or some German source, and there was a picture of Dominic Cahoon at the airport with his hockey sticks on his Oilers equipment bag, and it was all written in German. And I saw there was a German flag in there, and I'm going, "Oh, well, geez, he already signed to play in the Deutsch League."
Wouldn't be unexpected.
I better check this out. So I checked it out, and I found another feed in English that said he was flying off to play for Germany at the World Championship. So that's why he was getting the heck out of Dodge as fast as he was. So. And this was a tweet endorsed by the Oilers. They had the same tweet, but with an English caption above it from the Oilers, wishing him good luck at the World. Well, okay, that's a little less looking like a hostile takeover of the player. But that aside, I mean, good for him for going to play for Germany. I was half wondering if Leon would do the same thing. Germany's looking good over there, man, 3-0, and I like the player, but your point about skating, like he's occasionally quick, but I wouldn't say fast, and he'll lose a foot race in either direction. Even on the back check, if you're a diligent back checker, but the other guy has got the puck is faster than you, then you've got a problem. And so he's I don't think he'd be a bad guy to bring back as a more bottom six left winger with some skill. I mean, it would be nice to have some skill that can put the puck in the net on the bottom six. And he scored what did he get, 8 or 9 goals this year, and in 2/3 of a season, we got to remember, and no time on the power play. Yeah, he had 9 goals. So if put that on 82 game seasons, 13, 14 goals, and that's decent production. But on the other hand, you got to say, well, he was playing with Draisaitl and a little bit with McDavid. You should get some goals, and he did, but he didn't sort of exceed expectations.
It's funny because Tyler Ennis, and we can talk about Ennis now because I'm just kind of segueing there. I don't think Tyler Ennis is a more effective player than Dominic Cahoon, but Tyler Ennis looks better. Like he just looks faster and quicker, and he's more dramatic with the puck. The results aren't any better than Cahoon's. I actually think Cahoon's results are better than Ennis's. Cahoon's a much better positional defensive player, which is kind of an underrated thing with wingers, something you don't necessarily notice. But Ennis was the most likely winger in the regular season to be out of position on a grade A chance against. He did fine in the playoffs. Ennis did, but Cahoon actually made a couple plays to create grade A scoring chances. He made a great pass to Cuckoo. I think it was in game 3, if I'm not mistaken, where Cuckoo had a great shot. Cahoon passed it cross seam, shredded it through the offensive zone. So Cahoon has that. So I'm with you. If he comes back in that role, kind of is in the Ennis role, if he takes the Ennis role on the team next year, I think that would be the proper role for him, and I think that would be not a bad idea. I'm okay with that. I don't think he helped his cause in the playoffs, though. He was taken out of the game. He got benched, so the coach gave his opinion in no uncertain terms.
Well, Ennis played 30 games, and he had 3 goals, so that's an 8-goal pace. And Ennis actually made a slightly higher cap hit, 1 million to I think 975. So let's call it a wash for Cahoon. But if you ask me which of those two would you like to have back next year, I think I would pick Cahoon.
He's younger, and I think they will probably. My guess is move on from Ennis. I mean, if they signed Ennis again, I wouldn't be losing my mind either. I think he's a good player. But I also think he's probably someone at this point in his career who would do a lot better in Europe. And it's probably that time in his career for that kind of move.
And he is a little flashier, but I noticed that, he did some tricky moves and stuff, but nothing that ever seemed to get him through anywhere closer to the net. Somewhere around the periphery, and you beat some guy one-on-one, but you're still on the periphery. Yeah. Well, what have you done, really? And, he does have some nice flashy moves. He's an entertaining player. And, not a bad depth player, but we had him this year as not a bad depth player, and he got 3 goals in 30 games, and he got waived twice, and he spent a lot of time on the taxi squad, and he's very much at the marginal, I won't call it entry level, replacement level player. And I mean, in reality, that's what the taxi squad guys did all year long, was they replaced other guys on the roster, and they just cycled through, and there was not too many of them that sort of went from taxi squad status to full-time, have to have them in the lineup every game status over the course of the season. And Ennis certainly didn't do that.
I'm going to bring up one player now who I think really did increase his stock and his chance of getting signed next year, Devon Shore. And it's really just based on the final game and the final few 3 or 4 periods of that game, which included periods in overtime. He just kept getting stronger and stronger. He's a big guy. He's a fast guy. He can kill penalties okay. I think he's not great at it, but I think he's okay at it. And maybe he can learn. He's a physical player. He came close to scoring in overtime. He barged in there and drove a hard shot that just missed the net. He got a breakaway that Hellebuck made a great poke check on in overtime. He looked like someone who was going to score. And that kind of impression, I think, makes a big impression on the coach. It's why Tippett was going to him, along with his size and speed. So I think Devon Shore has earned another contract based on his regular season play too, where he worked his way up from kind of was he just on a tryout when he got here, a PTO?
Yeah, he was PTO, and they signed him to NHL minimum. Same kind of trajectory as Alex Chase on 2 years ago, where he came to camp, sort of established NHL player, a bit of a known commodity, has a half-decent chance of making it, and he made it. And now does he do the next step Alex Chase on? They sign him to a $2 million a year extension. I would think much better chance they sign him to a 1-year extension, still near the NHL minimum. Maybe a small raise.
Of the 3, Ennis, Cahoon, and Shore, I think Shore is probably the best bet to get a new contract. With Cahoon may well. They'd have to see, I think, what else is on the market too, before. But I could see them signing Shore just because he's a solid bottom 6 winger at this point and can fill in at center. And
he can fill in at center, although not without risk.
Yeah, not really. He's not. He doesn't. His defensive reads aren't great because he's an energy player, right? Mm-hmm. And he gets going, and then he forgets who he's supposed to cover. He doesn't cover the right guy in the defensive slot or on the back check. Yeah,
on that coverage, but he does. He does bring energy. He does hit. He's bigger than you think. And when he was on that line with Archibald and Kara, all 3 of them would bring it on the physical side, and that was kind of the identity of that line. But his fancy stats are not good, Devon Shore. Like, he got crushed in shot shares below 40%. And that's not good no matter who you're lining up with and against. When you get below 40%, you're in the it's very hard to win that game. You have to be shooting 50% higher than the other team to break even on the scoreboard. Your shooting percentage has to be significantly, like 1.5, what the other team has to break even at a 40% shot share. And that's starting to become mathematically grim when you're down there.
For the line, like, it's hard to separate out who might be driving that, what the level of competition is. That for the season, Bruce?
Yeah.
Or for the playoffs? Oh, for the season.
I'm Puck IQ, which does have the season, and they have against elite competition 37%, middle competition 38%, bottom 6 competition 39%. So no matter who he was playing against, the Oilers were getting worked on the shot clock. So that's, from analytical perspective, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, so some people will put a lot of stock in that, and others will put less. I don't know how much Oilers management will put in stock. Will put
Probably
in that.
not a lot because they haven't paid a whole lot of attention to analytics, David, and it's hurt them.
Well,
If you look around the league now at the top teams have top-notch analytics departments, and the Oilers have one guy that's listed, and apparently he has other duties besides that. So they're a little bit behind in that where they were once at least trying to be trailblazer, but it's not really developed within the organization. Not to my satisfaction as an analytics fan and an Oilers fan. I'd like to see them doing a whole lot more of it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of on-ice analytics, so I guess I have a different take than you.
Okay.
If they may be subscribing to services which do different analytics that actually review video tape, dig into that, they may be getting outstanding information from outside the club. It'd be good to have someone in the club who interprets that. If they were just to hire another person who's a big fan of on-ice analytics, they'd say, don't sign Devon Shore. And I'm not sure that's the right decision.
How's his scoring chances? I haven't looked at him specifically
through the year. They were they were bottom. Let me just see if I can find it really quickly, Bruce. They were kind of not great. They were okay.
Meh.
Yeah. But that's typical of bottom
sixers.
Wingers. Yeah, bottom sixers. What are we hoping for here? Let me just have a look. Shots final, goals final, grade A, chances final. Oh yeah, so he not that good actually, according to our work either. He's just he's below. So of the bottom, so for the wingers, it starts off with Ryan Nugent Hopkins, plus 1.1 grade A chance against per game. Plus 1.1 grade A chance per game. Puljujarvi plus 1.1. Yamamoto plus 1.1 grade A chance per game. Chason plus 1 grade A chance per game. Cahoon plus 0.9, James Neal plus 0.8, Josh Archibald plus 0.5, Tyler Ennis plus 0.5, Zach Kassian plus 0.4 grade A chances a game, Devon Shore plus 0.3 grade A chances a game, and Kyle Turris plus 0.1 grade A chances a game.
This is a plus.
so he's right down there with Turris. So maybe. Yeah. So maybe I'm putting too much. Here's I'm going to criticize myself. I'm putting probably a little too much weight in the playoffs here. In terms of
he did play well last night for sure, and he's done okay on the penalty kill. And the penalty kill unit did better in the second half of the season when Shore was a recorder on the team and on the penalty kill, and that had some weight. I mean, at least bears further analysis. But by eye, he was a pretty decent penalty killer, and he was a good signing. Like for this year, for the way things are set up, bringing in an NHLer with like 280 games, I think he had in his 4 years, and bringing him in at the PTO, giving him a look, signing him, clearing him through the league and bringing him in off the taxi squad. He was perfect for that. Like a 12, 13, 14. I got no problem with that guy in that position.
Yeah. According to our analytics, they shouldn't sign him. So it aligns with the on-ice analytics. So I will say that. And I think that, if you're being hard-headed about it, you're gonna put some weight in that. So that said, I do think is I went up though based on the playoffs, so definitely, because here I was ready to give him a contract. October 2nd, thought I'd be backing off that a little bit and thinking hard about who else is out there.
Right. Look around. Where he slots in is in a 12, 13, 14. He's Patrick Russell with maybe a little more NHL experience.
But if you're looking for like a third line center or third line winger, Cahoon might be a much better bet than if you want to win games than Devon Shore, even though Devon Shore might fit your idea of a third liner better than, slow Cahoon, big fast Devon Shore. It's kind of like the seen him good player versus the player who stacks up better by the numbers. All right, let's go on to James Neal, Bruce. He also got benched. What did he play? Just two games? I think he played 2 games. He looked okay. Bruce, I think he didn't help his cause at all, very much. It's about the same. And they're going to be tempted to buy out James Neal, I think, this summer. I don't know. We're spending Daryl Cates' money here. Maybe he doesn't want to spend that money. But does the owner, does it work out where we've had this discussion before. Does the owner in the end, if he buys someone out, he does pay more, because if he's spending to the cap every year and he buys someone out, he has to pay that buyout money, and then he can pay more money to the cap. So he does spend more if he buys somebody out in real dollars.
My calculations, it's a wash.
Are you sure?
Well, my calculations say I'm sure.
Okay.
And that is, if he was to buy out James Neal, and for simplicity, let's change 5.5 and 5.75 and call it $6 million. So they would pay him, instead of $6 million for each of the next 2 years, they'd pay him $2 million for each of the next 4 years. Right? So they're saving $4 million. They would open up $4 million in cap space for the first 2 years, but then they would lose $2 million in cap space for the next 2 years. So that's 8 minus 4. So they'd only have $4 million in extra cap space, which is actually the amount less that they have to pay Neal when they're buying him out. So it's just redistributing. And it's, you're saving a third of his ultimate contract cost, and you're opening up 2/3 of it in the immediate short term in cap space, but you have to pay a penalty down the road. And to me, it all washes out. I mean, there may be accrued interest or some damn thing that, if the salary cap was actually changing, it would be as a percentage of cap, it might be a different advantage, but the salary cap ain't going anywhere. And that contract needs to go somewhere, because it is not good. They're paying way, way too much for what they're getting out of that player.
Your calculation strikes me as correct. And the only thing that you're facing then is the opportunity cost of the several $1 million, which you're spending now as opposed to spending money in the future, which is in business something that's considered. But other than that, you're right. You can only spend to the cap, and you can't spend over it.
But we know what it's like paying out the tails of these buyouts. I mean, we're still paying for Benoit Pouliot this year, for God's sake. And he left in 2017. So
as bad as he was, they should have suffered through another year of him, I think.
Yeah, probably. And they did suffer through a second year of James Neal, but I have an idea they're not about to suffer through a third and a fourth, that they're going to come to some kind of resolution, either a deal with Seattle or buyout. That's sort of the two likely things. I'd be surprised.
Yeah, me too.
Back.
Me too. Josh Archibald. What's your thought on Josh Archibald? Did he increase his value or decrease it in the playoffs?
His value took a giant nosedive with that one single incident that produced a costly penalty for the team and a costly suspension for Archibald himself, which kept him out of the last game of the season. He must have been dying in the press box yesterday. I can only imagine, and I feel for him. Like, he is a high, a very intense, team-oriented player, but he crossed the line there, and there were some extenuating circumstances. It was a running feud, but he got called out, and he got, the game suspension. I thought it was slightly harsh, but I mean, McDavid didn't even get a 2-minute penalty, let alone a suspension. But anyway, that is the fact that he hurt his stock a little bit in the longer run. Dave Tippett loves the guy, and he's got a job here for one more year on his contract at $1.5 million. And, Dave Tippett's had a role carved out for this guy since the day he arrived, and he's been doing it. Penalty killing, grinding bottom six winger, take the body, make the other guys pay the physical price, and put him out late in games to defend leads. And he's done all those things since he's been here, and he did the same thing as last year in Arizona. Like, he was this player before he ever got here. That's why when they did sign him, I thought, that's unbelievable. They got him at that price, because he does all these things. Team speed was a problem. Remember when they got him? Team speed wasn't a problem. Team aggressiveness was a bit of a problem, and penalty killing was a huge problem. They finished 30th in the league the year before and went all the way up to second last year under Tippett, and with guys like Josh Archibald entering the mix. And so he's got his role on the team, and he's the one right winger who is comfortable flipping over to the left side, which proved to be quite valuable at times this year because they often dressed 5 right wingers.
I've often felt in the past for about a year and a half that Tippett overrated him as a player, and I never liked him when he was moved up to play with McDavid. I didn't think that worked, and I think the numbers said it didn't work. But as this year went on, I started to like this player more and more. There's just no denying that his work ethic and his hitting. It's he hits to hurt, and he hurts opposing players. He's very aggressive, and he just became more assertive, I thought, on the attack, more effective on the attack, going to the net with the intent to score. And I noticed the same player in the playoffs. I actually don't think that his value with Tippett was harmed very much by that incident, right. Maybe a little bit, but it was, as I've made this point before, it was you want Josh Archibald to play with aggression, and you wanted to play at the edge. And sometimes when that's happening, you're going to go over the edge. If you criticize and come down on a player who goes over the edge now and then, I don't think coaches do that because they realize that's counterproductive. We need him at the edge. He'll realize he screwed up. Probably don't even have to. You don't have to say anything. Oh. No one's. He knows, and he's a response. So I don't think it's affected his value, and I think he's definitely back. And I'm glad he's back. He's a very useful role player on the Edmonton Oilers. He's a fast skater, and he's starting to make better plays with the puck. I just noticed. Maybe I'm kidding myself, but I thought his passing and shooting looked better in the final 15, 20 games of the year. He just seemed to be really getting it as an NHL attacker all of a sudden. So. I don't have high hopes of a 20-goal season from him, but maybe a 10 or 15-goal season.
He's had a couple of 10-goal seasons, including last year. His last year in Arizona and his first year here were statistically very similar, and they were both around 10 or 12 goals and 10 or 12 assists, or at least at that rate. And he's here to stay. He's like a torpedo up there, eh? And if you want to have some physicality in your lineup somewhere, you need to have some of it. And it doesn't all have to be big bruising guys. It doesn't have to be big Bobby Clobber or your guy. But it's you want guys that don't give an inch. And Josh Archibald is that guy.
Yeah. We both like him, it sounds like.
Well, I like him in his role, and there is a role for a player, a couple of players. They don't all 12 have to be like that, but none of them be like that. You got to have guys who do these certain jobs, and Josh Archibald does several of those things.
It's interesting, just to go back to Shore for a second. We know that the Oilers have they need a center who can win faceoffs in a bottom line role, and that's the job Shore could lose to that signing. Because they could bring Haas back as a winger or as a center, but they could also bring all the centers back essentially, and McLeod, but also bring in another guy who can play the wing and center, but who can win some faceoffs at center, and that's where Devon Shore may lose out. Here we go, Zach Kassian, Bruce. I'll start it off. I think his value went up because of the playoffs. He started out injured, coming back. He was really weak in the first couple of games. He didn't look involved at all. But in the final 2 games, he was much better. Puck protecting, hitting, making plays, looking like an NHL top 9 winger. He's certainly paid like one. So he's not going anywhere. I could see the Oilers not protecting him in the expansion draft, maybe hoping. But on the other hand, you need tough guys. You need tough players, and if he can play, he's probably worth his contract. He's a very difficult player to judge because you need having that fierce guy in the lineup. I think is comforting. Just imagine if you're lining up for a faceoff and you look over on your wing and there's Zach Kassian as your wingman.
Yeah.
If he's opposing you, you're opposing him. You imagine yourself opposing him. I imagine he's my line mate. I'd be thinking, okay. all right. because and that can matter, and we
Hmm.
see that it matters in the playoffs. The way the stupid playoffs are called, where someone, an analytics person in Toronto, I think her name is Rachel Dewar, did
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
watched all four games, and she counted 40 fouls against Connor McDavid without one penalty, Bruce.
Yeah.
So this is where Cassian can help a little bit. I mean, Cassian was on the ice and this still happened, but he wasn't playing with McDavid, of course. But having that big, tough, physical player can make a difference in the playoffs, and especially if he can play a bit of hockey. And Zach Cassian can when he's bringing his game in, when he's
Yeah.
focused. So we saw that so little this year that it's not hard
Yeah.
to raise his value.
Yeah. That's how I see it. He raised his value. I would argue that games 3 and 4 against Winnipeg were very possibly his two best games of the entire season.
Yes.
And we finally saw that player, or at least some resemblance to the player that somehow convinced the Oilers to sign him to a 4-year extension at that pricey contract, which he delivered very little value in signing that contract, but he did deliver value in this series. I thought he was good in those last two games, and particularly game 3.
Based on his scoring chance numbers from the season, you wouldn't have him back as a two-way hockey player. I
Yeah,
mean, he's down there with Ennis and Shore, just ahead of Turris. So
right.
he's in that category of players. You just don't cut it anymore as
Hmm.
NHLers unless they have some
Right.
outstandingly special skill. And does Cassian have that? He didn't even show that in
Well,
the regular season.
yeah. That's where if I'm his line mate and I'm looking over and seeing him, I'm thinking, I hope I've got my poke checking stick because I'm going to be cleaning up some defensive
Defensive.
issues. But
Yeah, yeah, you're right, Bruce. Okay, Alex Chason, did he raise
mhm.
his value or lower his value?
In the playoffs,
Yeah.
I think he overall probably lowered it a bit. And I'm a fan of Chase On, as you know, and I've defended him more than once in the past. And he did deliver a beauty power play goal in his last game that put Oilers ahead 3-2, where he did a real nice job cleaning up a rebound around and stick handling it around and actually deking and depositing on big Connor Hellebuck to put the Oilers ahead 3-2. So that's going to be my lasting memory of Alex Chason as an Oiler, but I have an idea that he's going to disappear into the sunset. I mean, they they paid him and they paid him to do a couple of roles for him, but in the overtime, he never even saw the ice. And 60 minutes or 40, basically the last 60 minutes of the game. I think he had one shift halfway through the third period, and that was it. And of course, they didn't get any power plays in overtime, so there wasn't an opportunity to use him on the specialty unit. But uh, when you're not in the top 9 and you've got other guys like Devon Shore playing ahead of you, that maybe gives an indication of where you stand in the coach's big scheme of things, at least at that crucial moment. So I like the player. I think he has uses. I'd like him a lot more at a significantly lower cap hit. But I'm not in that camp that says he was grossly overpaid and that contract was a ridiculous mistake by Ken Holland. I don't feel that at all. But he's 2 years older. He's lived out that contract, and to me, he's somewhere in between the 650,000 he played for in his first year as an Oiler when he scored 22 goals and was great value, and what he's been getting the 2 years since. I think if you averaged out the 3 years, they got value out of this player.
Oh, I agree with that. He is the underrated aspect of his game. The obvious thing that he does well is hard plays around the net, especially on the power play.
Mm-hmm.
The underrated aspect is his defensive play. He was
Mm-hmm.
by far the best defensive winger, according to limiting grade A chances. He's always covering. He's covering the point. He covers his man. He back checks hard. He wins board battles. He does all the things that a defensive winger is supposed to do, and he did it better by quite a bit than any other Oilers winger at even strength this year. And in the playoffs, he didn't make one mistake on a grade A chance against. So he's a very safe player to have on the ice. And so there's a lot of juggling because I think they're going to keep some of these guys, between Haas, Chason, Cahoon, Shore. They might keep two of them,
Mm-hmm.
let's say,
Yeah.
maybe even three, but they're not going to keep all of them. So it's just who else do they get and where do these other guys fit in? If Neil goes, for instance, they might think geez, he was the other guy that we counted on the power play.
Mm-hmm.
We can count on Puljujärvi, but it'd be good to have Chase on too as the backup plan,
Mm-hmm.
and because we know he's freaking outstanding at that role.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's willing to take, like 800,
Big haircut.
$900,000 big
Mm-hmm.
haircut, $800, $900,000 a year to be paid as a fourth liner, and stick with this team.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're balancing what he has compared to Shore, who's leakier on defense,
Right.
but is a penalty kill specialist, not at the same level as Chason's a power play guy. And then against
Mm-hmm.
Haas, who's this we'll get to, is a peculiar and interesting player.
Right.
All right, I think we've done the wingers, and now it's time to move on to the centers, Bruce. So just as a general comment, I think the centers played very well in the playoffs. I don't think, except for, the rookie Ryan McLeod, I think he was a bit overwhelmed personally by the situation. He played very well in the regular season. He was good in the regular season. He opened my eyes up.
Yep.
Big, fast player. Not so much in the playoffs. I think he faded into the woodwork, and his lack of physical play was noticeable. He had to barge in there and win those pucks, and he didn't. That's what's expected. That's what he's going to need to do. He was solid-ish defensively, but he just wasn't up to that level of play quite yet. But he's only 21, so let's give him a break. So I think he didn't do anything to help his cause, but I don't think that. I think they have a good impression of him within the organization, and he's going to get a chance to be on the third or fourth line next year. I don't know what his faceoffs are like in the end. We don't have AHL stats.
He was just over 50%. I think it's like 41 versus 40
in the regular season.
Not a huge sample size, but he didn't get crushed, right? He
It's
wasn't
pretty good.
He wasn't below the Cogliano line. So, but his long-lasting reputation from pre-draft, all the draft reports have said he's a bit of a perimeter player. He doesn't like to, to crash the tough areas. And you look at the playoffs, which is the hardest time of year, and he had one hit in 4 games, right? Like, it just doesn't seem to be part of his game. And you look at how big and fast the guy is, and you go, geez, just finish your check once in a while, man. You're going to free up some loose pucks, and you're going to get some people looking over your shoulders when they know you're speeding around out there, if they don't know if you're going to hit them or not. And he's got, he would have that potential, but to this point, that scouting report has proven to be pretty accurate, and we heard the same thing in the AHL last year. That said, in his second year in the AHL, he made a huge step forward, and he did make it to the NHL. But we're talking specifically about the playoffs as we are here. Did he advance his cause? Well, he got lined up on the second line with playing center with Nugent Hopkins on his wing for a couple of games, but also he was the guy that got nailed to the end of the bench in the long overtime. He was one of the 3 that never saw the ice. So I'd say he stabilized his case, but he's clearly a project.
And he's competing. Let's face it, he's competing with Dylan Holloway right now.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Holloway was a center in college.
Mm-hmm.
Every bit as big and fast, if not faster, than Ryan McLeod, but a pretty nasty body checker and physical player who was really good at faceoffs in U.S. college hockey.
Yeah.
So he's coming, and I'll be surprised if he's not on the team by the playoffs next year. By the second half of the season, I could see him starting in the AHL. If McLeod doesn't seize a job and establish himself, as a third-year pro, as a checking third-line center, getting that job done, which means some checking, Holloway's going to come on like gangbusters and take that job. So, Jujhar Khaira.
Well, here's the good news. One last thing on McLeod is that there's more than one job to be had.
Yes.
For a homegrown, grinding forward, even potentially in the bottom 6. And I mean, there's many scenarios that would have both Ryan McLeod and Dylan Holloway on the same team. Maybe not both playing center, but both on the team. And I think the Oilers are in a position where they can almost say, we can, in our signing priorities this summer, in our budget priorities, we think we've seen enough in Ryan McLeod that we're going to try him at 3C, and we're going to spend our money elsewhere at other areas of need. And we like what we've got. We've got Holloway in reserve. We think one of them's going to seize that bull by the horn. So let's go out and pay an extra $1 million on the scoring winger for McDavid. Or
That's exactly what they need. Yeah.
So I mean they got a few priorities, and I'm not sure 3C is necessarily one of them because I think they may have internal solutions. Just like at 3 right defense, they've got Evan Bouchard there. Why go out and spend a fortune on extending Tyson Barrie, for instance, when you got a young and that's yet unproven but very talented right shot defense with many of the same attributes? You fill that hole from internal, then you got money to solve something else.
Yeah, and there is going to be these players coming up like Benson. When we talk about whether are they going to sign Dominic Cahoon? Well, Tyler Benson's essentially the same hockey player.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit more physical, maybe a little tougher on the boards, but really similar in so many ways. Right. So are they going to keep Cahoon? And with Shore, like Ryan McLeod's kind of like Devin Shore. Now Shore's more experienced, and he did show something in the playoffs here that might give him a little zip to his name when it comes up in the discussions about who's getting signed or not. But McLeod, he big fast guy who can score a little bit and play some hockey, kill some penalties. Well, let's just go through it. Let's see you, Devin. We've got Ryan. It could well be the answer here. Now, Jujhar Khaira is an interesting one, Bruce, and Gaytan Haas. We can do them together. I think that Haas raised his value. He was trusted over Khaira, for instance, in the overtime. And he needed a boost like that because he'd been injured and had been sitting out. And my gut feeling is they won't bring him back. But
Khaira?
Haas.
Oh, Haas. Right.
Haas, who played ahead of Khaira in the overtime. I like Gaytan Haas. If you could have a 14th forward, if you're going to go, I'd love him as my 14th forward on a team that you could slot in at wing or at center because he's such a fantastic defensive center. But and he's a strong penalty killer. He's a weak scorer though, and he's a weak scorer.
2 goals, 1 assist the entire season. I mean, 20 odd games that he played in.
He's like the little man's Leonard Petrell. And he's although I appreciate Gaytan Haas's game, I think it's a pretty.
He's better looking though.
Than Leonard Petrell? I don't know, Bruce. I guess if you like blondes or brunettes would be the question there. Gaytan Haas is I think I like him because for so many years I've watched centers F up in the defensive slot. Just years and years for the decade of darkness. Not one center other than Horkoff who could get the job done in the defensive slot. There might have been a few others now and then. Draisaitl can do it now when his head's in the game. But I really appreciated what he brought. So I probably really overvalue him because of that. But on the other hand, Bruce, they lost. They were losing games at the start of the year because they thought Turris could do that job. And
he was way better than Turris.
He was, because he doesn't give up anything. Yeah, he doesn't give up much. So, but he didn't step up this year. He had a chance, and he didn't really step up in the second half of the regular season. And because of that, I'm skeptical he'll come back. Maybe if they decide they don't want to bring Khaira back, he'll be I think it's between him and Khaira, and I think they'll pick Jujhar Khaira because Jujhar Khaira didn't have a great playoff. He was okay-ish, but he had a pretty good regular season when he was not hurt, and had a really good run of play, his best run of play as an Oiler. He's a big physical guy, which is something to say for him. So I think they'll pick Khaira over Haas.
Yeah, I'm not sure Khaira really helped his cause much in the playoffs. Like his line, was tasked with matching up against, one of Winnipeg's top lines, and they really, they were on the negative end of the spectrum. And of course, he got drilled in the face-off circle, including on the game-winning goal in overtime in Game 3, where he badly lost the face-off. And that's, if you're going to play 3C or 4C, it'd be nice to start out with a puck once in a while. Really would. And so
I was talking to talking to a former Golden Bear today about that face-off, and he was saying, you just when you're the left, when you're taking the face-off on that side and you're left center, you don't try to win it. You just got to tie up the other guy, so he can't make a quick feed.
Right.
And he said Kara tried to win that face-off. It was the wrong tactic. So I'm not an expert on face-offs. I'm not going to venture in there. But
that sounds real.
I think he knew what he was talking about. So yeah, I don't know. What I think you have to look at Kara's health, and I don't think he ever really got back to being as good as he was after the second bout of is it fair to say concussion? I mean, I think that's what it was. And we'll see what happens. I think they'll go with Kara over Haas because of the physical aspect, though.
Yeah, it wasn't a concussion because he was back practicing within 7 days both times. And there's a hard and fast rule about that. So whatever the diagnosis was, whether it was official bell ringing or something, but not a concussion, but he didn't play within a week, but he was practicing within a week both times, and he did come back and play. And I think he was most effective before he first had to deal with that issue. He had a real nice, strong run of games there for quite a while, and
yeah.
So his contract's up. 1.2 million would be his qualifying offer, and he's still. I think this is right. Still RFA, Kara. He's a 2020. Sorry, he was drafted in 2012, so he's a 94. So he won't turn. He's August 94, so he won't turn 27 until after July 1st. So he's still an RFA.
Could he be one of those guys that they might be afraid? He had pretty good points per 60. I wonder if he's one of those guys they might be afraid would take them to arbitration, and they might back away from him in that regard. Because we saw that happen in the NHL last season with a number of players. Okay, moving on to McDavid and Drysuttle. I think McDavid wasn't as good. He was much better in the regular season than he was in the playoffs. Maybe the mugging was more intense in the playoffs. But I think Draisaitl was better in the playoffs than he was in the regular season. I thought Leon Draisaitl was the Oilers' best player. Him and Mike Smith would be in contention for that. Maybe Darnell Nurse, but I would rate Draisaitl over Nurse. I just thought Draisaitl was fantastic. He's everything you want in a playoff performer. He cannot be stopped by physical play. He fights through it. He doles it out. He's nasty. Scoring goals, making plays, defending. He is the total two-way package, and it came through in the playoffs. I was, again, just like I was in 2017, really impressed with McDavid. Just such a spectacular regular season where I thought he improved his defensive play. I thought he was strong defensively, generally speaking, in the playoffs as well. I don't have a big issue with his defensive play, unlike Pierre Maguire. His attacking, though, was down considerably. He was, he averaged one major contribution per game, less at even strength. In the playoffs. He was unable to break through in the way that he was in the regular season, which is pretty spectacular. But so it's the second big playoff run in a row. It happened in 2017. It's happened again now. I'm sure he's frustrated as hell by that. And I think it has a lot to do with the way the refs call the game in the playoffs. He's constantly obstructed, and he's not allowed to be the offensive supernova because of the nature of the refereeing. It thwarts him. There's no difference in his effort. I don't see any, he's trying as hard and he's got as much skill as ever. So I'm going to say it comes down to playoff reffing, Bruce.
Well, that's a huge part of it for sure. And I mean that sports writer you mentioned earlier from out east that counted 30 infractions by her count that she thought were technically penalties against
40,
McDavid, and 0 were called. And same last year against Chicago, McDavid drew 0 penalties. Now in 8 postseason games, he's drawn 0 penalties. Now you tell me if you've seen anybody anywhere around the NHL, or certainly in the North Division, who spends a higher percentage of a game with the puck on his stick, and therefore being the focal point of attention than McDavid, And then watch what happens to the guy when he doesn't have the puck on his stick, but he's trying to go get it, and he's got 2 or 3 guys in his face, and taking him out along the boards, screening him off, running double interference picks on him, and it's just mind-boggling, that. And of course, the Oilers' big weapon. They got the #1 power play in the league. Like, that's how they beat you. They force you to foul them, and then they beat you on the power play. Well, last night they played between the start of the third period and the end of the game in the third overtime. The Oilers had 0 power play opportunities to win that game. The refs say, well, we don't want to win it for them by giving them a power play when the guy's getting tackled to the ice or Leon's getting his stick held for 20 seconds. Or DeMello is sticking his knee out and spinning McDavid around and high-fiving his teammates on the bench, and the refs are. And as you can tell, it's a sore point with me, and I think the NHL is doing a shitty job of actually delivering on the product that they could deliver by so shackling their star players. And it's not just him; it's star players around the league. Patrick Kane, a dazzling dipsy doodler that has the puck on his stick all the time. He ranked 554th in the NHL for penalties drawn per 60 minutes. 554th, Patrick Kane. McDavid was 26th. Leon was 311th or something. Like, it's just ridiculous. And the guy, they have the puck. They try and make plays. All the other teams are trying to defend them. Sometimes they trip them. Sometimes they grab them. Call it. Hello, call it. If if the other team's going to prevent them from illegally prevent them from getting chances at even strength, well, give them a chance on the power play because they earned it. Call it.
Oh, hey, maybe I got Sid Sixiero's comment wrong. He said, so he's saying Connor McDavid's not going to put up with this much longer.
Well, maybe
he's talking about the NHL. He could be. Maybe I'm honestly, maybe I did get it wrong. I have to look at the context of this. That's not what the comments were suggesting. I read the comments under it, and they all thought they took the meaning of Edmonton, but maybe Sid suggested that Connor McDavid's not going to put up with the NHL much longer in the reffing there, and that makes sense. So,
the league. I mean, Dom Lucian of the Athletic wrote a fantastic article today about, and he specifically talked about McDavid. That was his subject because he was talking about the 0 penalties that he drew this year and last year, and what are the odds? Just based on his regular season rates, where we also would argue that he gets far too few calls during the regular season, but in the playoffs, his rate just dove that much further that he got no calls, like literally 0 calls. And Lucian, who is well known for not being an Oilers fan, so it wasn't just you and me being Oilers homers, whiners about the officiating. He's just calling what he sees, and he's saying the game is, being seriously impeded of seeing these guys at their best because these third line clutch grab whack and hack or third pairing defense types like, say, Colin Campbell used to be, have free reign to do whatever. And it's because guys like Colin Campbell are running the ship down there in New York with their sensibilities of what hockey used to be back in the the 50s kind of thing, and they got to get a 21st century sort of bent to their thinking. I said to someone today, I'm not going to call Colin Campbell a dinosaur, but his best before date was 65 million years ago.
They need a culture change there, Bruce. It's the owners,
100%.
it's the owners, it's the GMs, but it's also Bettman who's ultimately responsible, and the people he's hired. They got to clean them out. They got to fire all of them. They got to get rid of like 10 people. The people running the refs, the people running player safety, the upper management, everyone who's involved in that part of the game in the NHL.
Running player safety.
They've had their day, George Peros. They've had their day.
They've had their decade.
They're decades. They need to go. They need to be fired. And
100%.
Gary Bettman, if Gary Bettman won't do it, he needs to be fired. And so that's where I'm at. I think fans need to call for Gary Bettman to be fired. I think this is the only thing that will get the attention of the commissioner, and put pressure on him, have him fired, and get in someone who's going to change this culture at the top, because here's the thing: with the size of the players, the speed of the players, the injuries are getting more intense. We now know about concussions, all kinds of things that we didn't know in the past. That's why they're supposedly cracking down on headshots, and they are, I think, somewhat. They've just got to catch up with all that. But they have to just catch up with the other sports in terms of entertainment value as much as anything. But with the NFL in terms of making it an offensive league, with the NBA in terms of making it a league where the superstars shine. This is their formula for success in these other leagues. It's a great formula. So that's what they should sell. We're going to make more money. We're going to increase our fan base. We're all going to get a lot richer if we allow the best players to play their best. Otherwise, we're just going to keep mugging along, stumbling along the way we're doing, and we're not going to have a big increase. So that's the argument I would make. If right. In applying for the NHL commissioner job, I'm going to make you a lot more money by having Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid be the stars they can be.
Yeah, well, Jeff Villette had an excellent thread. Toronto-based guy had an excellent thread, and he was the one who provided those stats about penalties drawn per 60 minutes. And he listed the scoring leaders, and they were all, 26th and 300th and whatever. And then he referenced next to that a list of the basketball. These are the guys that go to the free throw line the most often in basketball. Joel Embiid is number 1. Giannis is number 2. Like the big stars are the guys that are getting fouled, and the refs are calling it. They're just calling the damn rules. So, hello. Give them room to do what they can do.
Yeah.
You don't have the Washington Generals against them, but you can't frickin' maul the guys and get away with it. But in the NHL, and especially in the playoffs, you can, and you're encouraged to. If you're overmatched on talent, it's fine. Just tackle the guy.
And I don't think McDavid's any easier to hit than Gretzky was. Maybe Gretzky was a little bit more elusive, but I don't remember Gretzky getting mugged like this in the playoffs. And people talk about 80s hockey being big brawl and much rougher. This didn't happen to Wayne Gretzky in the 1980s. He hardly got touched. He hardly got hit. Now, it could be because policing was such a bigger part of the game, and everyone was so much more afraid of Messier and Semenko at that time than people are afraid of Cassie and Darnell Nurse right now. That could be the main explanation. I guess that is the explanation, probably, because the policing actually worked at that time to protect some star players if they were elusive enough from getting hit constantly. But there's no policing now. They're just all there's too much money to be made by being the third pairing defenseman in the NHL. You're just going to go and hit McDavid and then take your beating because you can make $1 million. And it doesn't work anymore, the whole policing thing. So the league has got to police.
Well, given, it's not even like they're necessarily hitting him to try and injure him and take him out, right? I mean, give or take Mark Giordano doing what he did, and who knows how deliberate that was. But they're just trying to take him out of the play, and he's the meal ticket. Like, he's what's selling the game. You really want to go and pay $300 to go to a hockey game to watch two guys hold Connor McDavid in the corner while the play goes on somewhere else? I mean, I'm obviously oversimplifying, but I'm not paying to watch gladiators run the gauntlet. It's not really, as a fan, I want to see the talent. I want to see the skill, and I want to see I want to see the defense. I want to see the challenge that they have to go through, but it shouldn't have to be to this freaking degree that it's it's free reign to do whatever.
Are you not entertained? No, we're not. No, we're not. We're not.
Not as entertained as we could and should be.
Yeah, that's right.
For watching this product, right? I mean, the Oilers, just from a sheer financial standpoint, they got a $12.5 million a year hockey player who's drawing fans and putting people in the seats. And he's scoring points, but in the playoffs, his production went down, and the other teams, they were allowed to do whatever with impunity, and so he couldn't score on the power play either, right? So, and all that said, when we're getting back to McDavid himself, his performance in the playoffs, one thing I noticed, and I noticed again last night, I thought that he was playing enough minutes that as we got towards the end of the game, he became less effective. And in the overtime periods, like he wasn't like beating people with speed or stick handling, and maybe the ice getting worse. Who all knows? But in the three overtimes that they played, 60 minutes and 11 seconds, so basically one extra full game of hockey, he had one shot on net.
Yeah, their shifts were too long, Bruce. I was thinking the Oilers are going to get beat on a long McDavid Draisaitl shift here, where they're going to
Hmm.
get. It didn't happen, but it could have easily happened where they get out against a more fresher group of Jets because they were staying out there for I don't know how long it was, 70, 80 seconds shifts as the game went on, and I just
Yeah,
thought they
well,
needed to get
they
off there a
did
little
get they
quicker.
did get beat in the end, and it was a McDavid turnover
Oh, that's right.
essentially.
Well, there you go.
Uh,
I don't think it was at the end
It
of their
wasn't a
shift, but
long
you're right.
shift, but it
No,
was right after the penalty kill,
yeah,
and that was the time where the Oilers normally send those guys on to take it to the other team, but he couldn't make the shoot in deep enough, and of course he had another seriously bad turnover on a seriously importantly bad goal against that tied game three. So,
yeah.
he didn't make mistakes in coverage, but two times he coughed up the puck, which is not really what you expect. So his performance in the playoffs was a notch below the regular season, which still means he's probably the best player in the league.
Well, I thought he was the best player on the Oilers was Leon in the
Yeah.
playoffs. So
Well, we graded Leon an 8 and Connor a 7 the last two games, and the star pickers in Winnipeg picked Leon in both games as one of the three stars. So obviously, some people are what their eyes are seeing are saying that Leon did raise his game that little bit, maybe more in the playoffs. So
alrighty, Bruce. Well, let's leave it there for now. And I hope we have a podcast that is listenable and
yeah,
not full of glitches and all those
might
horrible
be full
things.
of
So
something else.
bitches. Thanks, Bruce, for talking.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for your patience.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.